My daughter drew a family picture at school, but there was a woman standing next to my husband who wasn't me. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. I want to start by telling you what my life looked like before everything fell apart, because I need you to understand that I wasn't naive. I wasn't blind. I was just happy. And sometimes happiness makes you stop looking for the cracks. My husband's name is James. We've been married for 12 years. We met at university. He was in my chemistry class, always sitting in the back, doodling in the margins of his notebook instead of taking notes. He'd somehow still get A's on the exams. That was James. Effortlessly charming, naturally intelligent, seemingly unburdened by the things that stressed the rest of us out. I fell in love with him slowly. It wasn't love at first sight. It was the accumulation of small moments. The way he'd wait for me after class and ask about my day. The way he remembered details I'd mentioned in passing. The way he made me feel like the most interesting person in whatever room we were in. My daughter, Emma, is 8 years old. She's got her father's dark hair and his easy smile, but she has my eyes blue-green like the ocean, my mother always says. She's bright and curious, and sometimes so intuitive that it's startling. She notices things, always has, even as a baby. She'd watch people's faces, reading expressions like books. Our life was good. It was the kind of life that other people envied, or at least, that's how it seemed. Mornings were sacred to us. Before the day scattered us in different directions, we'd all gather in the kitchen for breakfast. Not a rushed cereal and coffee situation, but real breakfast. James would make his famous pancakes with blueberries that somehow never came out even remotely the right color, but Emma loved them anyway. She'd sit at the counter, swinging her legs, telling us about her dreams from the night before. Often they were bizarre castles made of candy, dogs that could talk, adventures through enchanted forests. "Tell us more," James would say, and he'd genuinely listen. He wasn't scrolling through his phone or thinking about work. He was present. He was all there. I'd watch them together, my husband and my daughter, and I'd feel this surge of something that was almost too big to contain. Gratitude, maybe, or the knowledge of how lucky I was. These moments felt important. They felt like the real thing, the thing that mattered, underneath all the bills and responsibilities and adult complications. On weekends, we'd take walks together. James would hold Emma's hand, and she'd hold mine. And sometimes, we'd swing her up and over between us, her feet flying through the air, her laugh high and bright and completely unselfconscious. We'd go to the park, get ice cream, sit under trees and watch clouds. James would make up stories about what the clouds looked like. Emma would argue with him, absolutely certain she saw something different. "That's not a dragon, Dad. That's a lady with a big hat." "You're both right," I'd say, because that was the kind of thing I'd say. Conflict averse, always looking for the way to make everyone happy. Bedtimes were stories and tucking in, and Emma asking a million questions about why the sky was blue, and whether astronauts got homesick, and if dogs dreamed the same dreams humans did. James would answer everything with such patience, never once acting like she was being annoying or repetitive. He had time for her questions. Time for all of her. I'd stand in the doorway of her room sometimes, watching them together, and I'd think, this is it. This is what I was supposed to have. This is what life is supposed to be. And then I'd go downstairs and have a glass of wine and feel completely satisfied with my choices. My marriage, my daughter, my job, my home. It all felt solid. It all felt real and permanent and good. I want to emphasize this because I know how the rest of the story goes, and I know how people will judge me. They'll wonder why I didn't see it coming, why I didn't notice, Why I believed in something that was apparently a lie. The answer is because I loved my life. And when you love your life, you stop questioning it. You stop looking for problems. You assume the best of people, especially the people closest to you. You believe that the good thing you have is real. That was my mistake. Looking back now, I can pinpoint the exact moment things started to change. It was about 6 months before Emma brought home that drawing. I remember it because it was Emma's birthday weekend. We were celebrating with a small party, just us and Emma's best friend from school and her parents. We'd rented a little cottage by a lake, and it was supposed to be this perfect family getaway. Emma had been talking about it for weeks. James had to work that Saturday morning. He got a call, a client emergency, and he had to drive to the city to handle it. I was disappointed, but not angry. That's the kind of marriage we had. I understood that his work was important. I didn't make him feel guilty about it. He said he'd be back by evening. He said we'd still have time for the birthday dinner we'd planned. He wasn't back by evening. He texted me at 6 p.m. Running late. Client situation is complicated. I'm sorry, beautiful. Tell Emma I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you both. Emma cried. Not a tantrum cry, but a disappointed, sad cry. She'd been waiting for her father. She wanted to show him something she'd learned to do at swimming lessons that week, a new diving technique or something, and he wasn't there. I comforted her. I told her that Daddy was working hard for our family. I made excuses for him. I was good at that. Making excuses, providing context, understanding. He showed up at 11 p.m. The party was over. Emma was asleep. And when he walked in, he smelled like perfume. Not cologne, perfume. Floral and sweet, and definitely not anything I wore. I remember standing in the kitchen, watching him, and thinking, that's odd. And then I thought, he probably hugged one of the client's assistants, or maybe someone at the office. And then I didn't think about it anymore because I didn't want to. Because the alternative to not thinking about it was very unpleasant. But that smell lingered in the house for hours. Even after he went to bed, I could still smell it. I found myself standing in the hallway outside our bedroom, trying to trace where it was strongest, like I was following a scent I didn't want to find. After that night, things shifted gradually, not dramatically. If it had been dramatic, I might have noticed, might have confronted it. But it was subtle. James became distracted. He'd be sitting in the living room with us, but he'd be somewhere else in his head. His phone would buzz, and he'd check it quickly, sometimes with a small smile. A smile that looked almost secretive. He started going out more. Meetings, he'd say. Or drinks with clients. Or he had to go into the office on a Saturday because of a project deadline. These things had always happened, of course, but now they were happening more frequently. And he started giving me less detail about them. In the beginning, he used to tell me about his meetings, about the people he was with, about what they discussed. Now he'd just say, I have to go out, and I'd nod, and not ask too many questions. Because asking questions felt like I didn't trust him. And if I didn't trust him, what did that say about our marriage? Emma started saying things that I initially dismissed. Daddy was with a lady today, she said one afternoon, completely matter of fact, while we were making cookies. What lady? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. I don't know. She was pretty. She had brown hair like Daddy. Where were you when you saw them? At the park. I was with Grandma, and Daddy walked by with the lady. He was holding her hand. My stomach did something unpleasant. But then I thought, she was with Emma's grandmother, my mother. Maybe she'd mentioned something to Emma that she'd misunderstood. Or maybe Emma had misinterpreted what she'd seen. Kids did that. They made connections that weren't there. They created narratives out of fragments. Maybe it was a friend of Daddy's, I said. Or maybe someone from work. Maybe, Emma agreed, going back to mixing cookie dough. But she said it in a way that suggested she knew she was being placated. Even at 8 years old, she knew I was offering her an easy answer that we could both accept without having to dig deeper. There were other moments. James would come home with his shirt smelling like someone else's perfume. He'd be cagey about where he'd been. There was a period of a few weeks where he suddenly had to work late every Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday and Thursday. Like a schedule. One night, I checked his phone. I felt sick doing it, like I was the one betraying him by even looking. But I did it, and I found nothing. His text messages were generic. His call history was sparse. If he was doing something he shouldn't be, he was covering his tracks well. That made me feel like I was crazy. Because if there was nothing to find, then what was I even worried about? I was being paranoid and suspicious of my own husband. That made me the bad guy in this scenario. My mother noticed something was off with James. She mentioned it to me after a family dinner. "He seems distant," she said carefully, the way mothers do when they're trying to bring up something difficult. "Is everything okay between you two?" "Everything's fine," I said automatically. "He's just been busy with work." She said, and the way she said it suggested she didn't believe me, but was choosing not to push. But after she left, I sat on the couch in our living room, and I let myself acknowledge what I'd been avoiding. Something was very wrong. My husband was pulling away. He was keeping secrets. He was coming home with the scent of another woman on his clothes. The only question was what I was going to do about it. I decided to wait and see, to gather more information, to catch him red-handed instead of confronting him based on hunches and the vague scent of perfume. I was going to be strategic about it. I was going to protect myself and my marriage by being methodical. What I didn't realize was that I was also buying time for him to continue doing whatever he was doing. I was enabling it by not confronting it. Emma brought the picture home on a Wednesday. She came out of school with her backpack slung over one shoulder, looking smaller than she had that morning, which was probably just my mood coloring my perception of her. "Hi, baby," I said, picking her up from her after-school program. "How was your day?" "Good. We did art today. I drew our family." "That sounds nice. Can I see?" She pulled the picture out of her backpack carefully, like it was something precious. It was 5 by 11 inches, drawn on thick white paper with markers and colored pencils. And when I looked at it, the world tilted. There were 5 figures in the picture. On the left, there was a figure I recognized as me, brown hair, blue eyes, wearing a dress that looked vaguely like ones I owned. Next to me was Emma, her face drawn with careful attention, a smile on it. Then in the center was James. He was tall, like he was in life, with dark hair and a smile. But on the right side of the picture, next to James, was a woman I didn't recognize. She had blonde hair. She was wearing a red dress that was nothing like anything I'd ever owned. She was smiling, and she was holding James's hand. The sky behind them was blue. There were trees and flowers. It was a peaceful, happy scene. A complete family portrait. Except it was a lie. Except I wasn't standing next to my husband. This woman was. My hands started to shake. The paper actually trembled in my grip. "Emma!" I heard myself say, and my voice sounded strange, distant. "Who is this?" I pointed to the blonde woman with the red dress. "That's Aunt Sarah," Emma said casually. "She's nice. She gives me candy." Aunt Sarah, a name I'd never heard before. And she was giving my daughter candy. "When did you see her?" I asked, trying very hard to keep my voice neutral, trying very hard not to let the panic and rage that were building in my chest show in my face. "She comes over sometimes when you're at work," Emma said. She was looking at her picture while she talked, not at me. "Or we see her when Daddy takes me to the park. She and Daddy like each other." Oh God, oh God, oh God. What do you mean they like each other? They hold hands, and they kiss sometimes. Not like you and Daddy kiss, though. Different. I couldn't breathe. The picture was still in my hands, and I wanted to tear it to shreds. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat down on the curb outside the school, and I held my daughter's hand-drawn picture of my husband with another woman, and I felt something inside me break. "Emma," I said quietly, "does Daddy tell you that this is a secret? That you shouldn't tell Mommy?" She looked at me, and her small face was troubled. She knew she was saying something wrong now. Children have an instinct for it. He said, you know, Emma said slowly. He said Aunt Sarah is a friend, and it was okay. He had told her that I knew. He'd lied to my daughter to cover his affair. He was using her as part of the deception. Sweetheart, he's not telling you the truth, I said, and I pulled her close. You didn't do anything wrong, but Daddy was not being honest with you. I put the picture in my bag. I drove home in silence, Emma quiet in the back seat, probably sensing that something had shifted. My hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get enough air. All the things I'd been avoiding acknowledging, all the small signs I'd rationalized away, suddenly coalesced into a single, undeniable truth. My husband was having an affair, and he'd involved my daughter in the lie. I spent that evening moving through our house like a ghost. I made dinner. I helped Emma with her homework. I read her a bedtime story. And the whole time, I was shaking on the inside, holding myself together by sheer force of will. James got home at 8 p.m. He looked normal. He looked like himself. He kissed me on the cheek and asked what we'd had for dinner and collapsed on the couch like it had been a long day. Normal. Like our world hadn't just exploded. I pulled the picture out of my bag, and I laid it on the coffee table in front of him. For a moment, he just looked at it. I watched his face go through several expressions: confusion, recognition, and then a kind of weariness, like this was an inconvenience he'd been dreading but expecting. This is Emma's art project from school today, I said, my voice steady even though I wanted to scream. She drew our family, and in the picture, there's another woman standing next to you, a woman named Sarah, a woman who apparently comes to our house and the park and gives my daughter candy. He closed his eyes. He put his head back against the couch. James, not a question, a demand. I can explain, he said finally. Please do. He sat up. He ran his hand through his hair. He looked at me with those brown eyes that I'd loved for 12 years, and I waited for him to lie to me, to give me some story I could maybe believe, some excuse I could work with. I'm in love with her, he said instead. The words felt like a physical blow, not what I'd expected, not something I could explain away or rationalize. I'm in love with her, he repeated, and there was an almost apologetic tone to his voice, like he was sorry to inform me of this fact about himself. I wasn't looking for it. It just happened. We met at work and we started talking, and somewhere along the way, it became more than just talking. How long? I asked. 8 months. 8 months. That meant it had started before Emma's birthday. That meant while he was supposed to be at work, he was with her. While I was home managing our household and our daughter, he was with her. And you involved Emma. Emma sees me. She asked who Sarah was. I didn't know what to tell her. I didn't want to lie to her, but I also didn't want to lie to you, and I couldn't figure out how to do both, so I told her that you knew. You lied to her, I said flatly. You made her complicit in your affair. I know that was wrong. I know this whole thing is wrong, but I can't. I can't keep pretending that I'm not in love with someone else. I can't keep pretending that this marriage is what it was. Was it not what it was? I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it seemed like we had something good. We had a family. We had a life. We did, he said, and there was genuine sadness in his voice. We do, but I'm not happy anymore. I haven't been happy in a long time. I wanted to ask him when. When did he stop being happy? Was it a gradual thing or a sudden break? When was the moment he decided that his happiness was more important than his marriage, than his daughter's stability, than his integrity? But I didn't ask, because I didn't actually want to know. What would knowing do except make me hurt more? I want a divorce, I said. The words came out surprising myself. I hadn't planned to say them. They just emerged from somewhere deep inside me, from the part that recognized that this marriage was already over. He'd killed it when he chose Sarah over us. Sarah, I repeated. tasting the name on my tongue like something bitter. That's what she's called. The woman you're in love with. The woman who's been coming to our home. The woman my daughter drew standing next to you while I stood on the other side of the picture. I'll give you full custody, he said. I'll support you both financially. I don't care what you'll do, I interrupted. I don't want your support. I want you out of this house. He stood up. I can't leave tonight. We need to talk about this. We need to figure things out. We're figuring things out right now, I said. You're packing a bag and you're leaving. You can stay with Sarah or at a hotel, I don't care. But you're not staying here tonight. I don't remember a lot of the details from that evening after that point. I remember him packing a bag. I remember him trying to talk to me again, trying to make me understand his perspective, trying to get me to acknowledge that our marriage had problems that went beyond his infidelity. I remember staying silent because I didn't trust myself not to say things I couldn't take back. Or maybe I said them. I'm not sure anymore. The memory is fractured. I remember him stopping by Emma's room to say goodbye. She was asleep. He just stood in her doorway and looked at her, and I wondered if he was thinking about what his choices were going to do to her. I wondered if he cared. And then he left. The days after James left were surreal. I moved through them like I was wading through water. Get up. Make Emma breakfast. Take her to school. Go to work. Pick her up. Make dinner. Bedtime. Sleep. And then do it all again. Emma asked about her father. She asked when he was coming home. Daddy's not going to be living here anymore, I told her as gently as I could. But he still loves you very much, and you'll still get to see him. But Mommy and Daddy aren't going to be married anymore. Is it because of Aunt Sarah? She asked. She was sitting on the kitchen counter, swinging her legs, and somehow her understanding that this was her father's fault, not hers, not the result of something she'd done, made me love her even more fiercely than I already did. No, sweetheart, it's not because of anything you did. It's because Daddy made a choice that hurt our family. And sometimes when people hurt our families, we have to make the hard choice to protect ourselves. She was quiet for a long moment. Am I going to have to see Aunt Sarah? I hadn't even thought about that. The custody arrangements, the visitation rights, whether I could legally prevent James from introducing Emma to his girlfriend. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but I promise I will do everything I can to keep you safe and to make sure that you're not put in an uncomfortable position. I called a lawyer. I filed for divorce. I told my family what had happened. My mother was furious. My father was sad. My brother offered to key James's car, which made me laugh in a bitter, exhausted kind of way. Friends were supportive mostly, though a few made comments that suggested they thought I must have done something to push James away, that he wouldn't have sought comfort elsewhere if I'd been a better wife. Those friendships didn't last long. I didn't have the energy to maintain relationships with people who blamed me for my own betrayal. The divorce proceedings were fairly straightforward. James didn't fight me on custody. He accepted that I would be Emma's primary caregiver. He agreed to child support and alimony. He wanted to seem reasonable, I think. He didn't want to be the villain in this story any more than he had to be. I found out later, from a mutual friend who couldn't resist telling me, that James and Sarah had broken up. The affair had been his fantasy of something different, something exciting. But once he was actually free to pursue it, once it was real and not forbidden, it lost its appeal. He realized he'd destroyed his marriage for something that wasn't as good as he thought it would be. The irony was almost suffocating. He moved into a small apartment. He started dating someone else. He became the kind of father who was present during his scheduled custody time, but largely absent otherwise. He missed Emma's school concerts. He forgot her birthday once. He became a ghost in her life, a weekend father, the man she had to get dressed up for, the man she didn't quite know anymore. There was a moment about 6 months after James moved out when I was sitting at our kitchen table, the table we'd bought together, the table where we'd had so many breakfasts with Emma, and I realized I was happy. Not in an explosive, can't-contain-it kind of way, but in a deep, bone-level kind of way. I was happy to be alone, happy to not be managing someone else's emotions or making excuses for someone else's behavior, or wondering if I was being paranoid about my husband's faithfulness. I was happy to go to bed and wake up and not have to think about anyone's needs, but my own and Emma's. Emma and I developed new routines. We'd have movie nights where we made popcorn and watched shows together. We'd cook elaborate meals on weekends, following recipes from cookbooks, making a mess and laughing about it. We'd take walks around our neighborhood just for the pleasure of being outside together. We'd do art projects at the kitchen table. And Emma slowly stopped asking about her father, not because she'd forgotten him, but because she'd accepted that he was a part of her life that wasn't as present as he'd been. She grieved him, I think. In her 8-year-old way, she processed the loss of the father she thought she had, versus the father he actually was. I started therapy. I talked about my marriage, about why I'd been willing to overlook so many red flags, why I'd made excuses for him, why I'd been so quick to believe that his unhappiness wasn't my fault, when actually his choices were his own. My therapist helped me see that I'd been operating from a scarcity mindset. I was so afraid of losing my marriage that I was willing to accept less and less respect, less and less honesty, less and less from a partner who was supposed to be my equal. You loved the idea of having a marriage more than you loved yourself, she said at one point, and that statement stuck with me. Because it was true. I'd been willing to overlook my own needs and my own worth to maintain the fiction of a perfect family. I couldn't undo that. I couldn't go back and confront James earlier, or ask more questions, or trust my instincts instead of dismissing them. But I could move forward differently. I started prioritizing myself. I went back to the hobbies I'd abandoned when I got married, painting, reading, long walks alone where I could think. I spent time with friends who made me feel good about myself. I accepted that I couldn't control what James did or how he behaved, but I could control how I responded to it and what I would and wouldn't accept in my life going forward. I dated cautiously. A man here, a man there. Nothing serious. I learned to recognize red flags. I learned to trust my instincts. I learned that a healthy relationship wasn't about managing another person's emotions or making compromises on fundamental values. It was about two people who were equally invested in showing up for each other. About a year after James moved out, Emma asked if she could have the picture she'd drawn, the one with me and her and James and Sarah. The picture that had started this whole unraveling. I'd kept it, though I'm not sure why. Maybe as evidence, maybe as a reminder, maybe because I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Why do you want it? I asked her carefully. I want to change it, she said. I don't want Sarah in the picture anymore. I want to draw it how it is now. Just you and me and Daddy, but not all together like that. So she sat at the kitchen table with markers and colored pencils and her original drawing, and she covered up Sarah's face with purple marker. She drew a new picture on the back of the page. This one showed 3 separate figures, her and me at home, doing something together. Her and her father at his apartment, where they went on alternate weekends, and me, alone in the house, smiling. I know you and Daddy aren't married anymore, she said while she was drawing, and I know why. And I'm sad about it sometimes, but I think you're happier now. I am, I confirmed. I'm much happier. Good, she said, because you deserve to be happy. Out of the mouths of babes. I put that new picture on our refrigerator. The picture with 3 separate figures, each in their own space but still connected. Still a family of a sort, still bound by blood and history and love, even if the romantic kind of love had evaporated. I'm writing this story because I want women to know that your instincts are worth listening to. That feeling something is off is data. That I feel bad about this situation is a valid reason to investigate, to ask questions, to protect yourself. I also want women to know that staying in a marriage because you're afraid of what will happen if you leave is a trap. That children are harmed more by living in an environment of dishonesty and tension than they are by divorce. That showing your children that you value yourself enough to walk away from disrespect teaches them something important about self-worth. I want women to know that you can't fix someone else's unhappiness by being a better wife, that your husband's infidelity is not your fault, that you are not responsible for his choices or his emotional well-being. I want women to know that there's life after betrayal, that it's possible to rebuild, that you can be happy alone, that you can learn to trust again, that you can find peace and contentment in a life that looks different from what you planned. James and I communicate now, mostly about Emma. We're cordial. I don't hate him. I don't even particularly think about him much anymore. He exists in my life as Emma's father, and not much beyond that. And that's fine. That's actually really healthy. I'm not angry anymore. I was for a long time furious, actually, but anger is exhausting. It requires so much energy to maintain. And I had better things to do with my energy. I had a daughter to raise. I had a life to rebuild. Emma is thriving. She's brilliant and kind and resilient. She knows that her parents love her, even though we don't love each other anymore. She knows that sometimes adults make mistakes and hurt people they care about. She knows that her mother is strong and capable and won't accept less than she deserves. She drew that first picture because she was processing the world she was living in. She saw something that didn't match what I was telling her, and her child's honesty documented it. The picture wasn't the problem. The picture was just a symptom of the real problem. But it was also, in a strange way, my daughter's gift to me. It was her way of telling me the truth so that I could stop living a lie. The drawing made me choose myself. It made me choose my daughter. It made me choose a life of integrity over a life of comfortable delusion. And for that, I will always be grateful. Some days are hard. Some days I wonder if there was something I could have done differently, if there was a moment where I could have fixed things before they broke so completely. But then Emma climbs into bed next to me on a Saturday morning, and we watch cartoons and drink hot chocolate, and she's humming to herself, completely at peace. And I know that I did the right thing, that my choices, hard as they were, led us both to a better place. The woman in the red dress is gone. The affair is over. The lie has been uncovered and dealt with. And what remains is this: a mother and a daughter bound by love and truth. A home that belongs to us, where we set the rules and make the decisions. A life that is smaller than I once imagined it would be, but infinitely more real. That's worth everything I lost.